My United England is 6 times richer than France. With that cash, I funded myself a 16,000 strong professional army which crashed over 100,000 French levies like a roller. I broke the economy of this game in just 7 steps. Step 1. Betrayal. Why it's best to sell your own land. Step 2. A fake war. How to turn landings into a money farm. Step 3. Dancing with the plague. I'll use the epidemic to boost profits. Step 4. Serfdom. How to make money off peasants while having 0 taxes on them. Step 5. Reform and urbanization. Step 6. Turning gold into steel and wood. Step 7 is a walk to Paris. In other words, conquering France more effectively than during the 100 Years' War. Welcome imperialists, look us here. Before we move on to grand strategy, we need to click through the boring but crucial basics. I set technology toward RGOs and rapid adoption of later institutions. For rivals, I pick the small fries from Ireland. For now, I ignore France. The ruler, this is very important, becomes an admiral. And I immediately send the fleet to patrol the seas, preferably those near London. A member of my dynasty becomes a general and will lead the army, while my heir gets the best education. My cabinet will handle 2 things: promoting the national value of communalism and encouraging migration to London. For advisors, I pick people who are best at each of these tasks. It's not like I simply don't have family members I could appoint to these positions. Now it's time to set the sliders. So I get to the budget. I tax the lords and burghers to the maximum. Meanwhile, the peasantry will pay me no taxes at all. This will positively affect peasant satisfaction, who are the largest and least satisfied social group in my country. By lowering their taxes, I increase control, which boosts my tax income from lords and burghers. And since I'm not extracting much from peasants anyway, there's no point in taxing them. I also cut state expenses. Court, army, forts, diplomacy, everything goes down by half. Trade is of course automatic since there's no point dealing with it right now. And now the more important matters. Distribution of precious metals. Of course I completely ban exports. The entire early development strategy will rely on minting large amounts of my own coin. Time for laws and privileges. Feudal nobility, this improves my relations with the lords and ensures more loyal vassals. Peasants get literally 0 new privileges. The clergy gets 2 very important privileges. I have to grant a bit more to the burghers, 3 in total. Mainly, I increase development and tax capacity, and 2 privileges for the nobility. Especially important is the one pushing toward naval values. That's it. Now, in theory, I should focus on increasing legitimacy in the country. That would be a big mistake. The game developers decided they could limit us with new costs, but there's always a loophole. I simply keep legitimacy at 60 points. Paradox drastically increased the costs of the court and diplomacy. The problem is that these costs are now calculated based on the economic base, that is wealth and population, rather than, as before, the tax base. That's why maintaining maximum legitimacy is simply unprofitable. Wealth itself, meanwhile, assumes you have 100% control over the country. But in reality, it looks like this. You can see it clearly in every location. When you hover over this, wealth multiplied by control gives the tax base, from which you, as the ruler, collect taxes. The untaxed portion of wealth still goes to the social estates, which spend it on building development. But the 100 Years' War is approaching, and I plan not so much to lose it as to monetize it. In the meantime, you can check out ENEBA to browse the latest deals. Discount codes are in the description. For them to work, you need to use my link. Back to the 100 Years' War, I have no intention of losing a vassal for free, so I sell him to Castile, which will give me practically 3 times more gold for him than France. This also creates a chance for conflict between those 2 countries. As for the French, I only sell them 2 of my 3 continental provinces. In total, for the equivalent of what they previously wanted to give me for the vassal, and I sell that island to Normandy, the wealth gained through betrayal immediately goes back into circulation. I build new logging camps because I'm short on wood. In London, I then build a hospital. It's a center of trade, so every epidemic will hit here first. I also construct the English special building Peel Tower because although it's useless in other cities, here it greatly speeds up the return of prosperity after a plague. And unfortunately, after just 2 months, the first event related to the 100 Years' War, the return of Sir Robert. France demands that I hand over this nobleman, and I have quite a diplomatic response for them. And I guess the French king took it personally because he immediately died, which allowed my ruler to claim the French crown. As part of the 100 Years' War, I can take a number of decisions that I will basically never use. I could have demanded that France sign a peace treaty, But I have a feeling they would never agree, since we have minus 1000 relations. The 100 Years' War itself will only end when, first, I lose all territories on the continent, which has already happened, and when France consolidates itself by annexing its vassals. And that can take quite a long time, and honestly, the longer it takes, the better for me. While waiting for an unexpected French attack, I do a few things. I improve relations with my vassals to annex them as quickly as possible. And I improve relations with Castile to form an alliance in the future. Oh no, a war with France, who could have expected that? I don't even activate my troops and I leave the forts unpaid, because honestly, now it's time for the big scheme I had planned. The mutual objective of this war is to capture the capitals. And since I sold my territories on the continent, France now has to sail to me to fight this fake war. And while most people use the 100 Years' War to conquer France, I simply ignore it. This and every subsequent war with France can be played in two ways. The French fleet now and later will mainly consist of fishing boats, so usually any ships are enough to defeat it. Although in the second era you can add a few heavier ships to pick off and sink French fleets. Even if someone manages to land on the islands, usually the vassals are enough to defeat that army. But to be honest, I suggest you hide your fleet in ports, recruit 10 to 20,000 levies and simply let the French troops land, so you can crush small armies as quickly as possible. After 4 years, I squeeze 1000 gold plus war reparations out of France. And the whole trick is that France has to attack you. Because if you attack France with a casus belli, you'll have to capture Paris. I pump the looted wealth into Argios. This is currently the best way to quickly develop the economy early on. The second benefit is lowering food prices. And the cheaper the food, the higher the population growth. Only in the capital do I build urban buildings, when my number of burghers allows it. Then I activate parliament. I use my very high support among the lords to reform England. First the navy, to promote naval values. I abolish censorship and I get rid of the English parliament in favor of privileging the nobility, mainly to increase my crown authority. Because right now it's so weak that I'm losing a few % of my income. And this way I'll be able to tax the nobility even more. That social estate holds all the money. Paradox also introduced another new mechanic called peasant enfranchisement. It determines how much of the money generated by that social estate they keep for themselves and how much is stolen from them by the nobility. The nobility steals more from them the lower the control in a location. And as a reminder, my control is currently terrible. Additionally, I can amplify this effect with serfdom, which further burdens peasants with a 33% tax. Granted, it goes to the nobility, but look at this, it's incredibly powerful. Serfdom increases the satisfaction of the nobility, which means I can tax them more. Besides that, the stronger the serfdom, the stronger the levies, and the more efficiently my peasants produce basic goods. Free subjects, on the other hand, have become useless. The year is 1342, and I immediately go into administrative ideas. There's simply nothing better for building economic power. In this era, I also focus on literacy. I choose all developments that increase it across the social estates, cheaper vassal integration, and most importantly, proximity speed, because that will increase my control. In all cities and towns except London, I build marketplaces to increase trade throughput and boost demand for raw materials. Although this tactic has been heavily nerfed by Paradox, with each subsequent parliament, the pattern is quite simple. I raise taxes on all social estates and possibly implement some legal changes. For a year, I now raise taxes to the maximum and turn on my money printer, which generates absurd income. Inflation isn't really something to worry about, since it only slightly increases building costs, and just when I thought nothing could stop my growth, the Black Death arrived. For the rest of the continent, it meant apocalypse and collapse. But for my broken economic system, the plague is just another business opportunity and a way to increase profits. You'll see how I turned the death of half my population into a massive reset of state costs. Additionally, I decide not to wage wars to quickly unify the islands. With such terrible control and a fairly large number of vassals, it doesn't make sense right now. Later in the episode, however, I will test my new conquest tactic using centralization. Another war with France. The pattern is really the same. I let them land, massacre them on the beaches and rack up war score. Thanks to that, I milk France for more thousands. This time, I spend the money on developing my towns in several locations. Basically, those 4 locations. The plague has arrived and honestly, it's the best thing that could have happened to me. By introducing the segregation of the infected, I can maximize social values. Of course, also with the help of an advisor. Communalism gives a bonus to the satisfaction of all social estates, but a much stronger and better bonus is the cost of revoking privileges, reaching even minus 50%, and soon I'm going to shake things up with those privileges. There's also a darker reason. The extinction of half the population will cause the economic base to drop by around 20 points. And that will translate into court and diplomatic costs. I'll be even richer. After 2 years, communalism reached its maximum, so then I focused on promoting naval values. A very important milestone for them was surpassing 50 points, because right now I replaced the English Magna Carta and introduced port administration. For a country like England with a very long coastline, this government reform is incredibly powerful. It increases the development speed of all coastal locations and causes maritime transport costs to drop by 20% at both entry and exit ports. However, the strongest part of this reform is that additional building. I'll talk more about that later. The Black Death has passed and took over 1 million of my citizens, which significantly reduced my costs. I could have already formed an alliance with Spain, but I decided not to. I simply prefer being attacked by France. In the year 56, I also restored the English Parliament, because I significantly strengthened my royal authority, but more importantly, I now have a large enough family to fill my cabinet with my own relatives. I'm not worried at all about weakening my authority. It's all to tax the lords even more, but also the burghers. Costs reduced, French gold flowing, but the real wealth of the empire is built on exploiting my own peasants. So now I move on to step 4, where I'll show you how to fully reform the country to earn quite a lot without collecting taxes from peasants. Unless you want to. That's why I changed laws and privileges to boost the introduction of serfdom as much as possible. In the meantime, I also continue expanding RGOs wherever I simply don't have labor shortages. England is a very large country and just has plenty of space to build these RGOs. France also sometimes decides not to attack again, but instead wants to pay me for a period of peace. I focused on expanding RGOs until the burgher population in my cities and towns recovered. Now I wanted to build libraries everywhere. Libraries will increase demand for paper and books both during construction and operation. This translates into higher income from both scriptoria and paper mills. Because even though scriptoria are buildings mainly staffed by clergy, their income is actually distributed across all social estates in that location. To produce books, I need dyes, paper and wood. So right after libraries, I expand every building that also increases the production of these goods. This allowed me to increase income from both burghers and lords by several units per month. After 4 years, I essentially pushed serfdom to its maximum level. I'll probably reach 100% thanks to Parliament. Now I'll focus on innovation because I can introduce it quickly. I'm adopting the Renaissance and will have plenty of technologies to research. For now, I skipped the military tree because I needed several very important bonuses from the Renaissance. Universities will give my economy an even bigger boost than libraries, especially since noble laws will allow me to tax that social estate even more. Along the way, I'll gain an additional government reform and a slot for a relative in the cabinet. After innovation, I move on to introducing capitalism. That means I need to change employment laws across the country to start with the most profitable ones. Thanks to these actions, I already had a fairly stable income flowing into the budget, which allowed me to build a new building, the local governor. In short, it's like a mini capital that provides 80 proximity points. Unfortunately, at the beginning, we can only have one such building, unless I increase the rank of the Kingdom of England to an empire. And, in the age of discovery and absolutism, research the appropriate technology. However, it's a very valuable building and must be placed carefully. In England's case, best in a location with an exceptionally good port. Looking at the proximity map, you can see that the eastern coast is quite well supplied from London. On the western side, I have several good locations. I also looked at how the rivers are arranged, and it seems that Bristol is the ideal location. Thanks to it, I'll solve my problem with the western coast. Maybe building the governor itself isn't expensive, but there are other costs. I need to connect Bristol and London by road. And honestly, for me, it's best to do it along the river, which will become a highway between London and Bristol, also supplying other locations along the way. While the road to Bristol is being built, another major expense is upgrading the town into a city. For that, the location needs 30,000 population, so temporarily I allow peasants to migrate thanks to a privilege. In the meantime, I introduced the institution of banking, where I first develop better methods of paper production. Then I move on to bureaucracy, which will accelerate economic growth across the country thanks to decentralization. But since I rely on serfdom and severely lack a bonus to faster citizen promotion, a key technology is the one that unlocks a cabinet action for faster social promotion. After that, all that remains is researching better docks and port protection. All of this increases port capacity. And as I've already shown you, proximity spread across England depends on capacity. But let's get back to Bristol, which has already become a large city. I built the local governor here, and look at the change in the quality of control spread. This significantly increases my income. Placing this governor allows me to now deal with Cornwall right here. This is an area where my control is currently very low. In this region, there's a special building, Stannary Courts, which reduce control by as much as 25%. And unfortunately, you can't just remove them. Destroying them requires as much as 50% control. So now, in all these places where there are good port locations, I need to build at least a town, then construct all buildings that increase port throughput, then a road system from each of these locations into the interior of Cornwall, and finally send an advisor to increase control there. It will take some time, so for now I'll focus on other matters. For example, I'll change the inheritance system so I can choose better rulers. In short, I'll be able to pick my favorite son. This change is unfortunately very expensive. In the meantime, I also surpassed 50 points in capitalism, so I can introduce a new banking system that will really boost my economy. That's why I can now afford to modernize my fleet. I'm literally building dozens of new ships. Mostly I build barges which increase my naval presence. Capitalism has been introduced, and now I'm left with implementing the two most difficult things: centralization and significantly reducing aristocratic influence without introducing plutocracy. Changing these two values will allow me to massively weaken the lords below 25%, removing the penalty to maximum taxation for that social estate. However, before that happens, I need to get rid of my Welsh vassals, of which I have quite a few, and also enter a phase of massive urbanization across all of England. In all my provinces on the British Isles, I need to have at least one town, preferably a city. Besides affecting income, this also impacts the army. I'll start by transferring population between locations up to 30,000, however, I also made a mistake at this point. Before urbanization, it's best to begin building universities, because I already have quite a lot of towns, so they first need to start generating higher profits. Universities require even more paper and books to operate. So similarly, books will increase my demand for dyes, paper and wood. Wood means more lumber mills, and lumber mills mean greater demand for tools. Tools require iron, which sure, I can get some from RGOs, but much larger quantities come from a special building where I convert coal into iron. I obtain large amounts of coal from wood, which creates one of the strongest closed-loop systems for building an economy in this game. Look at how powerful a resource chain a single university needs to function. Literally, every time I start constructing one university, my profits increase by a few gold. After a while, I surpass the threshold of 200 gold in pure income. But that's still not the maximum I can achieve. After 70 years, I could finally end the 100 Years' War and renounce my claims to the continent, or I might come back here later. So I extended the 100 Years' War and can farm money, for example, for road expansion. As usual, I start expanding from ports inwards across the island as well as along rivers. Thanks to this, at the moment, I have a truly green England. But even better, Wales has stopped being just a land of rain and green hills. Road construction has turned it into the beating industrial heart of the English Crown Islands. At a later stage, I'll do exactly the same with the area around York. In these two regions, I'll produce practically all tools and weapons. And now, time for the cherry on top. A very expensive cherry actually, namely the London market is too large. Because of that, production in a place like Bristol is currently not 100% efficient. I waited to create a new market until I had essentially finished the urbanization process and built a very large number of towns and cities, in which I then constructed many marketplaces, because without high throughput, creating a new market simply doesn't make sense. Wow, this is so powerful. I immediately earn twice as much from trade, but the most important thing is that I no longer have penalties to tool and weapon production. And thanks to the large amount of iron in this market, I also get an additional production bonus. I even started exporting tools rapidly across the world. Bristol, alongside London, has also become a very important and wealthy production center. The English population is growing like crazy again. Every month, hundreds of gold flow into the treasury. Economically, I crush any country in the world. A country like France, even 3 times over. Step 6, where I turn gold into steel and wood, and I'll show you exactly how to build a modern fleet and army after the changes in the latest patch. I begin by building armories, literally across the entire country. The amount of manpower supplied still depends on control. And it just so happens that after urbanization, I have quite high control in my cities and towns. While building armories, I noticed something. Bailiffs now work differently. They are no longer a source of proximity, but instead provide a flat 20% increase to control. This is so overpowered that I literally build them everywhere I can. Or rather, wherever I'm missing at least that 20%. Bailiffs work in such a way that I break even in terms of both control and the strength of the lords. However, they have a limit on how many buildings I can construct. And that limit increases the more cities and towns I have. The year 1437 marks exactly 100 years since the start of the game, and also the moment to choose the second set of ideas, because the age of discovery has begun. Personally, I would go down the path of discovering the new world and creating a colonial empire. So let me know in the comments if you'd like a second episode with England. In the meantime, I recruited my land armies, they're ready. And it's not pure cavalry, but a mixed army to get those bonuses. Even though they were nerfed from 30% to 7.5%, they will still allow this army stack to defeat even 100,000 French troops. To get these bonuses, no single unit type can exceed 50% of the army composition. Unfortunately, in this patch, Paradox drastically increased the cost of regular armies. My small elite force of 15,000 soldiers costs a fortune. But that's exactly why I built this economy. To attack France, I only need to do two things: prepare a proper claim and build a war transport fleet. Although first I need to invent it. After 100 years I also completed the transformation of my country toward the values I needed. Well, almost humanism is still left. The most important success is weakening the nobility, to the point where their power is at 19%. Thanks to this, they no longer receive any penalty to maximum taxation. And yes, you can tax peasants or not tax them at all and still earn quite a lot, because the nobility still holds the money. After researching modern heavy ships, I immediately built 20 of them for the main fleet, to which I also add transport ships. And just so you know, fleets also get a bonus for diversity. In this case, however, I don't need it, because I'm certain my fleet is much stronger than the French one. I'm not even particularly worried about my smaller fleets guarding the waters around England, but I'm already building heavy ships for each of them as well, probably adding 2 to 3 to each. And after another 6 years, the time has come to execute my plan for the downfall of France. However, I begin step 7 with a war against the Scots, where France alone, without its vassals, fields over 80,000 troops, and I intend to win it using only the regular army. Initially, I used the new casus belli introduced in this patch: destroy enemy, available against any rival. I'll also call in the Spaniards for this war. For now, I order my heavy fleet with transport ships to guard the coastal waters. I immediately march my army into Scotland, and best of all, I encounter no resistance at first. Ireland is conquered by my vassal. Calling Spain might have been a mistake though. After the fall of Scotland, I decided to land in Normandy to test my troops in action. From what I could see, the French army consists solely of levies, and despite the French having an advantage in the battle line, I deal massive losses to them. The only question is whether I'll survive, since the French forces number over 100,000, while my armies here are much smaller. At this point, my biggest problem wasn't losses, but the fact that I had nowhere to replenish them. That's why the navy was such an important part of my early war operations. Every so often I had to use it to transport my army back to Britain. Suddenly, the Spaniards betrayed me, I was left alone. But I have to admit, my regular troops perform much better than the French levies, dealing far greater losses than they take. My cavalry practically shatters everything they throw into battle, and my own losses aren't that high. Paradox has messed with armies again. In this war, however, I focus on destroying French armies and winning consecutive battles. Forts aren't that important. The goal is simple: wipe out the French armies. Then I march straight to Paris and bring back plenty of souvenirs to London, and that's before the British Museum even became popular. From the French, I take one location and a lot of money. Again. Alright, I took an entire province. It will be an excellent foothold for future wars. From the Scots, I take literally half of Scotland. I create the historical vassal Normandy, because I'll want to reclaim all those territories for it. But the Scottish lands I'll simply integrate, especially since in this era I am already on a good path to expanding my cabinet. After the war with France, however, I ran into another very serious problem. Damn it, I have nothing to spend money on. I have a slight overproduction of everything I need, and that's on both of my markets. And on top of that, just look at how urbanized England is compared to the rest of the world. Everywhere else looks very poor. I'll fight the second war with France alone, and my goal will be to reclaim old lands. But the real objective is, of course, the French capital. This time I think I also got lucky, because France was fighting another war. Because of that, this war is probably going to be easy, I'm encountering no resistance, but soon the first French troops appeared. However, the AI still makes terrible army compositions, and I have a clear advantage. Beautiful. And since this time I have a foothold in France, my army can replenish itself there. I no longer need to retreat to England. But when I saw that I alone wiped out 70,000 French levies, while taking barely 4,000 losses, I have to say, Paradox really messed something up here. And badly. So I easily captured the war objective. Next step, Paris, to once again collect plenty of souvenirs, although it seems the French army returned, only to enthusiastically collapse in successive battles, while I kept wiping out more French forces. No, this is way too strong, only 12,000 left. As a result of winning the second war with France, I take these territories. I surround Paris and the second location with a governor, all to cut these two locations off from the rest of the country. An incredible victory, judging by the numbers. I have nearly 10 times fewer losses. And supposedly levies were buffed in this patch. Regular armies have never been as strong as they are now. Meanwhile, France won't be strong after this war. The governor itself disappeared. I even played another 20 years just to see how France would handle being cut off from its capital. It all looks like one big mess, unlike my beautiful United England, which can now form Great Britain and conquer France 25% cheaper thanks to territorial claims. I would also take advantage of being able to annex my vassals very quickly, mainly thanks to the bonus from highly advanced centralization. The main downside, however, is that I can have a maximum of 10 vassals. And if you miss Europa Universalis 4, I recommend checking out the episode I recently recorded.